You're listening to the Chopped Podcast, episode number 99. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today for the 99th episode of the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. What do we do here? Well, my goal is to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, discussions, everything related to food blogging so that we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Do you remember a couple of episodes ago how I was saying that, we're going to mix things up a little bit in the coming months? Well, I'm really excited about that because, we've been doing a lot of interviews on this podcast and we've talked a lot about specific topics, things that food bloggers need to know, like SEO and photography and video and things like that. And we'll do more interviews in the episodes coming up for sure. We're going to talk about more topics related to food blogging and SEO and photography and video and all of that as well. But I just feel like it's kind of time to branch out into some different areas. And I'm really excited to be sharing those with you soon. Today's episode may be kind of an example of that because I realized that sometimes as food bloggers, we're so kind of independently located, independently working, that sometimes I think we can use a little bit of team training. That's why I'm calling today's episode Fish for Food Bloggers. Have you heard of the book Fish? The subtitle is A Remarkable Way to Boost Morale and Improve Results. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background. I am on the park board for our local award-winning parks and recreation department. And recently I attended one of the staff meetings and they recapped this book for everyone, the book Fish. So they do this kind of thing on a regular basis. They're doing training. They have certain books that they reference between staff, and it helps everyone, I guess, to be their best and helps everybody to stay motivated. And I don't know, I kind of thought, how come we don't do this as food bloggers? It kind of made me miss the days of being in an office, and I don't say that too often. But, feeling this common bond between people and understanding a common language like that, I think is really helpful. So honestly, when you have a lot of staff, it's one thing that you kind of have to do. You have to find ways to keep motivation high because spirits can get low and then morale gets low and then people start to grumble, and that's not good. You want to keep spirits high, especially for people who are involved with customer service. So I think one of the things that can make food blogging so difficult is this feeling of isolation that can come over us. We hear this a lot, right? I feel it too. We're constantly trying to figure things out on our own, and it gets so overwhelming at times. So I figured on a regular basis, I'm going to pick a particular book and then we'll discuss it. And you can choose to read that book yourself, or you can listen to my description of the book and how it applies to food bloggers. Consider it our staff meeting. So the Fish book talks about Mary Jane, who is working in a toxic job environment. And to avoid the cafeteria at lunch group, she starts walking for lunch. So her office is located near the Puget Sound, and she found that setting very tranquil and calming after her time at the toxic work environment. But that's where she ran into the world famous Pike Place Fish Market, which is obviously what this book is based on. There was always a crowd and a lot of energy around the Pike Place Fish Market. I have to say that slowly because it's hard for me to say it. And so Mary Jane asked the owner, whose name is Lonnie, what the secret was, and he boiled it down to 4 major points. And these are the 4 points I'm going to go over with you today, and I'm going to share with you how I think they're relevant to food bloggers. The first one is choose your attitude. So there's always a choice about the way you do your work, even if there's not a choice about the work itself. So this applies perfectly to food bloggers. So if you've ever reached the point where you think you don't have control over your own blog, I don't know. I'm just going to say this. Maybe being a blogger is not what you need to be doing, right? Maybe it's like time to go back and work for the man. And that's just an expression. It's probably one that needs updating, but the idea of it is sometimes working for other people is a little bit easier, right? Because they set the agenda, they set the path, the strategy, all of that, and you work with them to make that happen. And sometimes that can just seem a lot easier. I think sometimes the idea of working for somebody else makes things feel more legitimate. Otherwise, we're just kind of here making things up day to day, trying to figure things out, and that can feel hard, right? But if you choose this difficult mission of being a food blogger, then you know that you have made a choice for that. And if you're choosing the work, why not choose the attitude as well? So the guy from the fish market, Lonnie, says this about this point. Here's what he said. Okay, we realize that as long as we are going to be at work, we might as well be having the best day we can have. And he goes on, in fact, we got so excited about our choices that we also chose to be world famous. A day spent being world famous is a lot more enjoyable than a day spent being ordinary. Working in a fish market is cold, wet, smelly, sloppy, difficult work. But we have a choice about our attitude while we are doing that work. The book also mentions David Whyte, who is a poet, and he has this to say: the needs of the organization and our needs as workers are the same: creativity, passion, flexibility, wholeheartedness. I love that. So here's the takeaway for food bloggers. How can you be world class? Are there parts about food blogging that you hate? I could probably answer that easily by saying social media. It's not my favorite. To be honest, sometimes when I'm sitting at the computer, scheduling shares to social media, I'm thinking to myself, I have a friggin' MBA. What am I doing? Thinking of little sound bites to write for my latest vegan recipe. It's like, what's going on here? But my takeaway from this book, and it's a great reminder to me and all of us, is create a world-class attitude about my work. The book says the folks at the Pike Peak Fish Market have signs around the office about having that world-class attitude. I'm going to do that too. I'm going to put up some signs that remind me to have that great attitude. I'm going to put on some music, look at inspirational quotes, and choose a world-class attitude when I'm doing the more mundane parts of my work. And guess what? Someday I plan to hire an assistant to do this work for me. But you know what? I want to make sure they have the world-class attitude too. And I can't expect someone else to have it unless I can exhibit it. I think that's called leadership. Okay, point number 2. Lonnie tells Mary Jane that the fish market is a real business with a goal to make a profit. They take their business seriously. However, they look for ways to have fun. They look for ways to include their customers in that fun too. So as a result, they have lower turnover and customers love coming there. So what are some ways that you can have fun as a food blogger? I mean, first of all, you can wear creative garb when you're in the kitchen or, just wherever you're at. You can put on some clothes that really make you happy. You can put on fun music. You can get together for coffee with local food bloggers and find time to laugh. I love this. So I love having fun too. And I can find myself getting a little too serious sometimes because I'm really trying to figure things out. I'm, interviewing food bloggers and I'm trying to talk about, like what works and what doesn't. And I can find myself getting way too serious about that stuff and forget that I'm in this to have fun too. And when I'm having more fun, I think that comes across in my blog and comes across to my readers as well. Okay, point number 3, make their day. Lonnie explains that they look for creative ways to engage their customers, to make their day. Engage with them, welcome them to join the fun. They focus on ways they can make another person's day by providing a constant flow of positive feelings. For them at the fish market, I think they actually throw the fish out to the customers. They're, kind of playing games and being playful with the customers. I was just wondering, how can we do that as food bloggers? How can we make our customers' day? Well, I can give you an example. I had someone write to me recently asking for a recipe. It was not a recipe that I had on my site. And I could have easily said, you know this, right? They can just Google this. Why are they writing to me? They probably spent more time writing the email than they could have spent Googling that and finding it for themselves. But I also realized that maybe they're writing to me because they trust me and they don't necessarily know other people. If they were to Google it, they don't know what the results that they would get. So they came to me for a reason. And in fact, I decided to take that seriously. I decided to be very thorough. I just actually had this idea. I want to make this person's day. So I responded, actually shared with him a recipe that I was working on that's not published on my site. I kind of gave him some ideas of how he could use this to adapt to himself. I actually could have also included links to other people's recipes, ones that I know that are good recipes. I think that would have been another great way to make his day. So that response from me was above and beyond the call. And my goal was to help make his day. I think we can do that in other ways on social media as well, sharing maybe some recipes. I for sure on our email list, right? Like I've seen people who have shared recipes that they're not publishing on their sites just to kind of make the day of the people that are on their email list. So I love that. Creatively brainstorm some ideas on your end of things that you can do to make your reader's day. Okay, finally, number 4, be present. When you're working, be fully engaged in your work. I'm learning about this every day. And so I have decided to have office hours in my work where I turn my email off and stay focused in my work, because I realize I can be easily distracted, especially in today's environment where it feels like there's a lot of things in the news that are, troubling. And I don't know, you can just easily be called away and get distracted by all of that. So for me, it's like turn my email off, spend at least a couple of hours fully focused on my work. And then, of course, maybe have certain times of the day where I turn the email back on because, we have to stay present in that as well. That's also part of our work. But I love this notion of staying present in the work. I think it does help me as far as the work that I'm doing. It helps me feel more engaged with what I'm doing versus, I see that red button that says I've got a new message in my emails. And it's like, what if that's, from somebody I really need to respond to right away? Well, then next thing you know, I've kind of forgotten that I was working on a post. So I think the idea of staying very engaged is so important. Okay, so I recently heard an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and it went something like this. The question to Jerry was this: why do you think you've been so successful as a comedian? Jerry's answer: because I fell in love with the work. We are choosing to be food bloggers, right? So why not take these points to heart? Fall in love with the work. Find ways to choose your attitude. Create opportunities for fun in your day. Make your reader's day and be present. You got this. Okay, thanks for listening in with me today. We've got so much more exciting stuff coming your way. I can't wait, so stay tuned. I appreciate the emails and the messages on social media, everything telling me how much that you're loving this podcast. It makes my day. You all are amazing. And in fact, if you have feedback for some of these different formats that we're trying out, the Friday chats, this staff meetings, the other things that we'll have coming up, just send me an email. Let me know what you're thinking. I would love to hear from you. In fact, if you love this podcast, I would love it if you would go to iTunes or Stitcher today to leave a review. Those kinds of things make a huge difference for the show. It really helps a lot. You inspire me, so I hope today's podcast is an inspiration to you as well. Thanks for listening and have a great week.